All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you to all the members for showing up, and we're going to open up with a word of prayer, and I've asked Representative Glanton to open us with prayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would you pray with me? Most loving and gracious Father, we just come before you on this day that you have assigned to us. Father, we just thank you for giving us an opportunity to serve this great state and the peoples of this state. Father, we now ask that you would be in this committee, that you would guide and lead us, that you would give us the right words to say with the right hearts. Father, we ask for your special prayer over the leadership of this committee as well as every member. We pray these in all things in the mighty and unmatched name of Jesus the Christ, and those who believe said, Amen.
Thank you. Well, welcome to the first committee meeting for the 2020 session for the Defense and Veterans Affairs Committee. We do have a new member. Where do you sit? Representative Singleton, if you would just hit your button.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Phil Singleton from Coweta County. Apparently I got some static on mine, but Phil Singleton, I'm from Coweta County. Just happy to be here. I did serve. I'm very blessed and honored to be on this committee. I'm an Army guy. I joined the Army September 20th, right after September 11th in 2001, while I was still in college. But I remember the president standing there in the rubble, and I just was compelled that I needed to serve, that I had the ability, so I did. I served for 15 years in the Army. I was an Apache pilot, and I was blessed to lead men in combat. I did all 3 combat tours out of the 101st Airborne, out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I deployed once to Iraq and twice to Afghanistan and Screaming Eagle. So if you're 82nd, we love you, but you got to have somebody that's second best. So I just blessed to serve, and I was blessed that I brought all my men home. But obviously, this committee is very important to me, taking care of our veterans in the state of Georgia. We have a huge veteran population, so I'm just happy to be a part of that. And just thank you, Mr. Chairman, and happy to be here.
We also have a new legislative council appointed to our committee this year. We got Jeff Lanier over in the corner over there. Do you want to make any comments to the public? Or?
I'm good without a speaking role.
All right. Well, thank you. And I've had the pleasure of working with him on several different pieces of legislation, and I've grown to respect his abilities as a lawyer. So if y'all ever have any questions on legislation, not even just pertaining to this, but other things, he's a good one to go to. Thank you for being here. I do, before we get into the official business, to the members, if you have people that are coming to the Capitol from your communities, whether one of the installations or people that you might want to recognize or have here, let's work together to honor these communities and serve. We set forward a couple years ago with that working group that we wanted to continue to work to raise the quality of life for the servicemen and women and their families in this state, and make Georgia the #1 state for the military to do business. And we did a lot of hard work. There's a lot of work to continue to be done. And so if there's anything that you need to do, let's try to coordinate and work as a committee to strengthen our defense communities. With that being said, we do have a resolution. It's Resolution 882, and everybody should have received a sub. Since I'm the lead sponsor and going to be presenting it, I'm going to ask the vice chairman to chair for a minute while we go over this resolution.
Representative Clark, we're working off of LC 44-13508. Is that what you've got in front of you? Or is that what? Oh, 1350S. I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead. Yes, sir.
There we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, HR 882. On January 3rd of 2020, members of the U.S. Armed Forces carried out a successful mission to eliminate Qasem Soleimani. This mission was ordered by the President of the United States, and it was authorized based on intelligence gathered by the intelligence community. Soleimani was the leader of the Quds Force, a group that President Bush designated a terrorist organization in 2007. 4 years later, the Obama administration announced sanctions on Soleimani and 3 other senior Quds Force officials in connection with an assassination plot that on the Saudi ambassador to the United States. The United Nations even placed a travel ban on Soleimani at the same time. And this resolution that we have today is to urge the support and commend the President, men and women of the armed forces, and the intelligence community for carrying out this successful mission while not harming any innocent civilians. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will stand for questions.
Any questions from the members? All right, number 6.
Yes.
Representative Scott.
Yes. I would like to know, you said that they had some intelligence information to go into support the killing of Soleimani.
Well, the intelligence was, they had to gather the information on where he was, to be able to carry out an attack, which would limit the loss of innocent civilian life. They had to have the intelligence and the know the whereabouts of Soleimani, and going back to years, they knew that Soleimani and his forces were responsible for killing over 600 servicemen and maiming several others, and thousands of other U.S. servicemen with roadside bombs and these things. And even going back to previous administrations, they had always talked about ways to eliminate this threat to the international community, and were always weary of escalating tensions and possibly going to war with Iran. So that the talks of eliminating this individual had been on the tables going back to the Bush administration and even through the Obama administration.
Okay, Father. So, do you think that this have made it safe for our soldiers overseas and safe for us here at home?
I believe any time that you're able to take out one of the top terrorist leaders in the world, it makes the world a safer place.
Okay.
Representative Jackson, you had a question?
I do. Chair, I appreciate you going over this resolution, but what's the purpose of this resolution?
Well, it's urging the support for the successful mission that took out a top terrorist leader in the world. And, the president for executing and command, well, not executing, but giving the authority for the mission, the men and women that carried it out, and the intelligence community that put together the information to make it a successful mission without the loss of innocent civilian life.
Appreciate that. Did we do the same thing for the removal of Osama bin Laden?
I did not do that. I think, but I don't think anybody on this committee would be opposed to that. Like, Bin Laden was a dangerous man to the world, and it was a successful mission that took him out as well.
Did we do this for Saddam Hussein?
I was not around in this body when he was taken out.
I mean, but we should have a record if it was done, correct?
Maybe maybe members who are here can answer that question. I don't know. I think it was celebrated. I think even when Bin Laden was taken out, I think it was celebrated, and it wasn't questioned.
I appreciate it. What about for Gaddafi?
I don't even know if I was alive.
You were alive. Because I was alive. You were alive. I guess my point, Chair, is if this resolution to highlight the men and women who actually carry out the order, that's one thing. But it looks like you have on here more than the individuals who are presented in a resolution. They were not around. George Washington was not around. George Bush was not the commander-in-chief when this was done. So I'm just trying to get a clear sense of the perspective of this resolution.
Sure, the whereases are just laying out the groundwork and the wording for the be it resolved. I mean, so the historical background of what went into leading up to the mission that was authorized and carried out. I mean, that's pretty standard. It was simply laying out the background information, going back beyond just the current administration, but going to previous, dating back to the birth of our nation, and our position on these kinds of things.
Right. So, no, I get the whereas. I mean, I'm very, very familiar with the whereas. But if we're going to go back, and if this is going to represent all of Georgia, let's really, as a committee, give the credit where credit should be. And that's the men and women who are on the front line. That is the intelligence, the 17 agencies that help fuel the expertise. It is the chairman of JCS. It is the Pentagon. It is the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. Our National Guard is not even mentioned in this. And our Georgia National Guard is currently serving over there.
Well, they are mentioned, brave men and women of the United States Armed Forces.
Right.
That pretty much blanketly covers the men and everything that you're mentioning.
Right, but I'm saying in terms of the whereas, if you're going to put George Washington in here, Chair, I just think that the 800,000 military veterans that reside in the state of Georgia, because that's what this is really going to go to. This is not going to impact what's happening in the Pentagon or Washington, D.C. If we're going to recognize, a resolution should recognize those Georgians, their participation. And if you're going to have George Washington in here, I urge this body to make sure that it truly reflects today those who are on the front line. I have nieces and nephews from Georgia on the front line right now. I have godchildren serving on the front line right now. And so if I'm going to vote today, if we need to vote today as a committee, a responsible committee to urge any kind of resolution, we're talking to 10.8 million Georgians. Let's spell it out for them. Not George Washington, not George Bush.
I mean, if you want to add an amendment that says, some language that says, put some of that in there, we can do that as a committee. That's why we go through the committee process.
But this is my first time, Chair, seeing this.
So it was okay. That's what the committee's for.
Right.
We can do that.
So are we looking at voting on this today?
Yes.
So we're not going to even make this a bipartisan resolution?
That's what the committee
So
process
let me from the chairman's position here. So this is a committee. We have a process. If anyone wants to offer any amendments to resolutions in front of this committee, they're welcome to do so.
and then we vote on it.
Just like any other process that we go through here in the legislature. So at whatever, once we go through the process, if there's any amendments that want to be offered, they will be considered in order and voted on accordingly. Any other questions, Representative Jackson? Okay, I've got a few, so I'm just going. Representative Tarvin.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this measure. Being a little bit libertarian leaning in my own thoughts, I'm not much for foreign wars, undeclared wars, but being a defense contractor chain at one time, when these things happened, I checked with the people in the DLA and people who had worked in intelligence, and this was a bad dude, very much so. He was a terrorist, and he was declared a terrorist. I heard mention Gaddafi and Hussein, a little bit different situation. I would not commend the way those happened if I was involved. But, you know, as far as, yeah, a little bit different situation. I thank you for bringing this bill. I see that it does and the brave men and women of the United States Armed Forces. It's urging the American people to support our president who made the call, the brave men and women of the United States Armed Forces, and intelligence agencies who help with the mission. And I don't see that it leaves anybody out as far as this individual instance that happened on January the 3rd, I believe, is when it happened. Mm-hmm. And I support the issue. I always check things out on my own. This was warranted. And as you hear, the importance of this, as I hear people talk about this being, labeling it as other things other than what it was, it's disturbing to me. We took out a terrorist that had killed Americans and maimed American people. And I thank you for bringing this.
All right, I'm just going to go in order that these appeared. So, number 12, Representative Saines. Oh, sorry.
Chairman Clark, thank you for bringing this to the committee. In terms of the perspective that this has, is this resolution, is it fair to say that this in no way declares from this body, from this House, if passed, that we love and appreciate all law-abiding citizens of the state of Georgia? That's
Yeah.
what is this resolution, and let me pause for a moment and say that out of any committee I serve on, I'm the most humbling one to be on, quite frankly, of someone who has not served in the United States Armed Forces. There's a great deal of individuals, yourself including, who have put on the line as much as that this country could ask. So I want to be very short with my statements, but in terms of it being bipartisan, is it not accurate that President Obama, National Security Advisor, former, declared this action as absolutely correct?
Yes, that's true.
With that in mind, I think it's absolutely correct that this committee, that this body, as an elected representative, as representatives of the citizens of this state, as with many armed force members in each of our districts, that we don't go back and digress into a point that we are afraid of honoring that solemn commitment that individuals made. And luckily that our president handled this in a way that it has kept us in peace and will likely keep us in peace for much longer. But I appreciate you bringing this to this committee's attention. I think it's a significant show of support for a true national security victory.
Thank you.
All right, Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Clark, I'd like to address Representative Scott's question about the intelligence gathering aspect of this.
Okay.
Is it not true that normally before the Commander-in-Chief executes something, he has surrounded himself with national security advisors, State Department, and it's a well thought out decision normally where all the intelligence agencies weigh in and they come to a conclusion?
That's correct.
You was asking me a question?
No, I'm addressing your remarks, and as well it should be. And I just being a student of history and looking back as to how these decisions are made, is it probably not a fair assumption to say that when President Obama, who I greatly applaud for the fact that he took out Osama bin Laden, when he made that decision, he basically probably used the same protocols that President Trump used in making this assumption.
That's correct.
So
and
there
even
is
invading in that instance, we used troops in a sovereign nation that had not given us an authorization to be there, but the target was of such a necessity when you have the intelligence to act on it. I think it was an appropriate action to use our special operators to go into that situation in a land that had not given authority for us to exercise, and we did it, and the world is a better place for it.
So, thank you for that. And I think probably it's fair to say that the protocol has remained the same when President Kennedy went in with the Cuban Missile Crisis, when all throughout time over the last 40, 50 years, intelligence is constantly changing. There's new things, but all these decisions are well thought out of, and I'd say that there is a protocol and a precedent set for these decisions. And so what President Trump did was to exercise that. So you think that's a fair statement?
I think the outcome shows that there was deliberation in relying on your intelligence community to provide accurate information to make a decision that needs to be made in an instance.
Right.
And we've seen, like you mentioned with the Bay of Pigs, when some of the information isn't 100% right, that the turnout of the event doesn't go the way you planned because the information was wrong. So the intelligence community deserves a lot of credit for giving reliable information to the president.
Thank you. And then I just want to address the remarks, Representative Jackson. And I agree with him. Okay, maybe a resolution was not offered by the House for President Bush. Maybe it wasn't offered for President Kennedy back in the past. Maybe it wasn't offered for President Obama. Maybe they should have been offered at that time, but they were not. And so now what we're doing is we're setting a new precedent, a precedent that no matter who the president is, when he defends American lives, he and the people that were involved in saving those American lives ought to be recognized, and I commend you for this.
Oh, thank you.
I'll come back to you in just a minute, Representative Scott. Representative Singleton. There you go.
Put it on 10. First of all, thank you for bringing the resolution. Can everybody hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Would you say, in your estimation, that war is not a partisan issue?
I would agree, and it's also not a welcomed issue. It's not something that I think people desire.
Thank you. Obviously, I'm on record already as I strongly encourage Congress to do their diligence and to do their part correctly when our country goes to war. It's something I've advocated for. But I also have been in that position to make that decision, to pull the trigger and to take out an enemy of the United States and free people across the world. So would you not agree that it is both right and reasonable to make sure that we attribute the success of this to the decision maker at the top all the way down to the executor at the bottom?
Yes, sir, and I think that's what this resolution is attempting to do, is the one who made a tough decision. The two previous administrations were faced with this decision and decided not to because of the fear of escalating tensions with Iran that would lead to war, and that it might cost even more American citizens their lives and soldiers their lives. So, it was a decision that was made and a tough decision. So, yeah, I think it from the top all the way down to the men and women that executed, down to the very precise execution of the target without causing any innocent civilian casualties.
Yes, sir.
That takes a lot of skill.
It does, and I haven't executed some of these missions. The precision of which this mission occurred is actually it's unbelievable how precise it was, and I think that's something that we all need to acknowledge, that we're blessed to live in a a country where we can be so precise and prevent civilian casualties and collateral damage. But I'd also say, having been in Iraq 2004, if that happened today and we were there, would you not agree that if today we were talking about taking out Uday and Qusay Hussein, which saved thousands and thousands of Iraqi and U.S. lives, that we would not also be considering a similar resolution?
I think so, yes, sir.
Do you not agree that obviously we didn't actually kill Saddam Hussein? We captured him, and he was turned over, and the Iraqi people executed him. But in the example of Osama bin Laden, if that were current and relevant today, would you not agree that we would also be considering a resolution to approve that action?
Correct.
Okay. I do appreciate it. I will say that I find this resolution to be timely, relevant for the state of Georgia, American people, and I thank you for bringing it.
Thank you.
Representative Scott.
Okay. First of all, again, I guess I have a problem with the resolution. One, because we only have Republican presidents that are listed, and I am sure that this resolution should have other Democrat presidents also. And another thing that I'm concerned about, if we're talking about the brave men and women, and we want to talk about presidents, could it just say all presidents and leave Donald J. Trump name off of the resolution and just have the men and women that have served in this? Is this just to politicize and give President Trump some glory to say that Georgia is urging this resolution to support him, really, instead of the brave men and women of the armed forces and the intelligence agencies? Since we have President Trump, the name up here leading, and like I said again, with no Democratic presidents, should we just take all the presidents out and just urge and commend the men and women that served and fought and brought this to the end?
Well, it has the current president's name, Donald J. Trump, on the resolution because he was the one that made the order. He's the one that gave the order. It's not all Republicans because obviously George Washington was an independent. So it's
Yeah, right.
but
Yeah.
We were just using statements and precedent that were laid out over previous administrations and comments.
Well, you skipped two Democrats to get to these. Okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
All right, Representative Jackson.
Mr. Chair, when it's appropriate, I'd like to make the motion that this resolution only reflect the bravery of the men and women in the United States Armed Forces and the sacrifices of their families to be reflected in our National Guard of Georgia. When it's appropriate, I'd like to make that motion.
Now, I believe you would need to actually offer an amendment to the resolution that's pending. Now, I will say Representative Glanton does have an amendment that he wants to discuss. So if we could, I think we need to give him that opportunity whenever you're ready.
We would have to make the motion to pass the bill, and at that point, we will ask for discussion, and that's the proper time for amendment.
Understand. Okay. All right. So we got one. All right, Representative Saines, one more question or comment?
Quick question. From your perspective in serving in the armed forces, is confidence in your commander-in-chief and their decision-making capacity and their ability to stand behind those who serve and sacrifice, is that a necessary and vital component of service?
I would think so. So, like you, I have never served. My parents served. I'm a child of a veteran. I've lived on military installations around the world. But I would defer to some of the men and women that have served, but I would think so that you need to trust that your commander-in-chief has the best interest of the lowest ranking troop in that the mission that you're ordering is worth that risk.
All right, we've got two more, Singleton and Representative Jackson, and we're going to recognize Singleton's. Are you withdrawing your question? Or are you okay? Okay, there you go.
Sorry, it's my first committee meeting, so just want to clarify a question. If Representative Jackson, for example, wants to do a resolution that it's just talking about the National Guard and the men and women who serve, obviously a topic that's not what we're addressing in this resolution. If an amendment doesn't pass that does that, we still have the ability to do a separate resolution that actually addresses that topic, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Representative Jackson.
So I just want to answer the question. So having served nearly 23 years in the Navy and retiring as a naval officer and having commanded those individuals under your tenure have more trust in you than the commander-in-chief. There's more interaction with that commander than the commander-in-chief. The men and women charged the hill, not because of the commander-in-chief. It's their direct officer that's in charge of them. That's where their trust, that's where their interaction. It is that officer that knows their family names, their children that were just born, their grandparents, and that's how the system of the military really works. So they'll never interact. A lot of our men and women will never interact with the top brass. They'll never interact with the commander-in-chief. And so that's how a lot of these missions are executed, because they have the faith and the trust in their immediate commander.
All right, Representative Rogers.
Yes, and Representative Jackson, I agree with you that the majority of military personnel, their closest relationship is with their direct commander, but also under the chain of command. He has a direct commander and goes all the way up to the commander-in-chief. But at this point, I think that Representative Glanton may have some things to add as far as amendment in order to move the process along. I'm going to move that we do pass this bill and then listen to Representative Glanton's amendment.
All right, thank you, Representative Rogers. We have a motion and a second. We have any comments or questions? Discussion? All right, Representative Glanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say that I've heard a lot of valid arguments, and as a retired military, United States Army, I certainly agree with most of what I've heard. But let me say this, Mr. Chairman. President Bill Clinton in 1996 said, and I quote, "Nations that sponsor and permit terroristic acts must face strong sanctions, specifically Iran being one of those," end quote. President Barack Obama in 2011 for sanctions against Soleimani for a failed terroristic act in Washington, D.C., he said, and I quote, "We still have sanctions on Iran for its violations of human rights, for its support of terrorism, and for its ballistic missile program, and we will continue to enforce these sanctions vigorously." So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would like to offer the following amendment. Insert on line 21 after the word and, A-N-D, as follows. And whereas the last three presidents of the United States, including President George W. Bush, has condemned the terroristic actions of Iran and commended our men and women of the United States military. And so we can utilize the words, Mr. Chairman, either the last three or the previous three, which would incorporate President Bill Clinton and President Barack Obama as well. And these two presidents, previous presidents, have been noted not only in the opening commentary, but in commentary throughout the discussion. That's the amendment that I offer.
All right, thank you, Representative Blanton. So procedurally, we would need to vote on the amendment, correct, before we would vote on the motion to do pass?
We need to have a motion to pass, at which point
We have
should
that.
ask for a discussion.
We have
in
that.
which case the amendment can be offered.
And which has been offered,
Yes.
okay?
At which point we can vote on the amendment.
All right, so,
Are there any? Yes.
correct. So we have a motion to amend. Is there a second? There, a second from Representative Prince. All right. Yeah, if you could restate the amendment.
Absolutely. The amendment states, insert in line 21 after the word "and" as follows. And whereas the last three presidents of the United States, including President George W. Bush, has condemned the terroristic actions of Iran and commended our brave men and women of the United States military. And this would include President Bill Clinton as well as President Barack Obama.
All right, thank you. And so at this time, we will be voting on acceptance of the amendment offered by Representative Glanton. I believe we can have discussion. Yeah. All right, and so first up then is Representative Jackson. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So just for the sake of clarity of that amendment, are we just going to say the last three presidents, or is your amendment going to be very specific and say the names of those presidents, just like how this resolution also giving specific names?
Mr. Chairman, my amendment would allude to the actions and the ideas of the last three presidents of the United States. It would not, in this particular language, be specific to a particular president, but to identify the last three presidents previous to the current one.
Okay. All right. So I guess, so will it say President Bill Clinton, George Bush, and, cause y'all got me saying George Washington. George Washington been dead longer than he's been alive. But anyway, so I'm just trying to get clarity of your amendment. Will it specifically state, just like how we have Ronald Reagan, which was my first commander-in-chief in 1983, will it be specific? Because just like the other commander-in-chiefs, their names are specific. They're not grouped by a numeric value. So I'm just trying to get clarity of your amendment. Will it be very specific and say President Bill Clinton, George Bush, and Barack Obama?
My amendment, the language that I have here, does not specifically state what you're asking, but the process allows for an amendment to the amendment. And so if there's someone that has a desire to amend the amendment, then that's a part of the process. And so for this purpose, I'm open to amending the amendment to include those particular names. But again, it will have to go through the process.
All right, Representative Sains.
I get the point of this amendment is to be more inclusive in terms of previous actions that we can be proud of. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In terms of this bill, the way I see it is it's very specific to a particular and timely national security action that's been recently taken. And we have a lot as Americans, as Georgians, to be proud of the many actions of our armed servicemen and women and the commanders in chief who lead them, I would be hesitant to try to put in the notion that this bill is an all-inclusive item, and that would be my issue with this, that this is not intended to be an all-inclusive bill. This is intended to speak specifically on the scope that has recently happened.
And Mr. Chairman, follow up. And
Yes.
so, all due respect to my colleague, I'm only stating, you said that this was a matter of a timeline. I'm only stating that which was included in the opening commentary for why this resolution should pass. So in the author's opening commentary, he himself talked about the previous Democratic presidents that also felt the same way. So although my language does not specifically state that particular individual, it is consistent with the opening commentary of the author of this bill in asking for passage of this resolution. I apologize.
All right, Representative Scott.
I guess I want to make a comment to statement following up with Representative Glenn. So what you're saying that the amendment that Representative Glenn has no merit for this. So this is a resolution just supporting and praising the president, President Trump, for his actions. So therefore, again, maybe I would say, well, the rest of the president names need to come off of it and just praise President Trump if that is who the resolution is intended for, since, according to what you just stated, this is who the resolution is intended for, the current president. So therefore, all the other presidents' names need to come off, and maybe it should just be President Trump's name.
So to comment on that, the whereases again are just laying out a framework for what the resolved is, and I would, maybe we just say the previous 3 administrations and leave off any names. Like it's like with your resolution. With your amendment, just
The
not even mention George Bush in there because George Bush is already mentioned with the axis of evil comment.
I would, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I would, in my mind, based on the opening commentary, whereas we talked about the thought process and the actions of the previous presidents, being President Bill Clinton and President Barack Obama, that if we're not going to specifically address those 2 individuals in the resolution, then I would look at the fact that we remove George W. Bush and we go to the previous 3 administrations, and that's something that we might be able to come together on, if that makes any sense.
Well, you were making a separate whereas from the previous one.
That's correct.
All right, so where we are right now, we have a motion and a second on the amendment. Is any further discussion? All right, Representative Rogers.
Would you read the complete amendment? Read it as amended.
Jeff might have to.
We've got it. We've got it right here. We've got it right here. Representative Blanton provided a copy or a printout. So then I'm just going to start on line 19, since it's the first full paragraph that's affected.
That's correct.
All right. So whereas President George W. Bush designated Iran as a pivotal part of the axis of evil that aggressively pursues these weapons and exports terror, while an unelected few repress the Iranians' people hope for freedom, and whereas the last 3 presidents of the United States, including President George W. Bush, have condemned the terrorist actions of Iran and commended our brave men and women of the United States military. Is that accurate, Representative Bland?
It is, and Mr. Chairman, we could actually use the word, where the word last is, we could insert the word previous. And then we wouldn't have to identify President George W. Bush in second term.
So are you amending your amendment?
It sounds like it. So, council,
Yeah. Because it seems as though we need to vote on the amendment as presented,
and then vote on the amendment to amend.
and then vote on the amended amendment.
All right. So, Mr. Chairman, depending on the posture, I would like to amend the amendment at the appropriate time.
All right. Any further discussion on the current question regarding the amendment originally stated? Representative Jackson, did you have another comment?
Yes,
All right.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So just for the sake of clarity and principle, because as Chairman Clark continued to say, we understand the essence of the whereas is to basically provide the framework. So I get that. I get that. I'm not. We write these resolutions all the time, so I get that fundamental principle. But I'm just trying to make sure for a resolution for Georgia, if we're going to say that this is the framework based on prior administrations, and that's the reason why I was seeking clarity from Representative Glanton's amendment. It only makes sense for us to be consistent and more coherent. If you're going to go and identify a quote from a commander-in-chief in 1793, and then you're going to identify a quote from a commander-in-chief in the early 80s, and then we just catapult everyone else, and then we land on GW, and then we catapult again, and we land on the current administration. So I'm just, if we're going to say the last three administrations, let's just say the last three administrations without the name. But if we're going to use names, if you're going to identify a commander-in-chief that's been dead longer than he's been alive, then why can't we identify all living presidents? And I'm not trying to say include Jimmy Carter, but I'm just saying let's be a matter of principle. So that way the men and women that are on the front line right now, if they were to receive this resolution, they will not be disheartened. If our Georgia National Guard, they're not really reflected in here. Let's do it by name. If you want to put the Brigadier General in here, right? Let's make this more Georgia-centric. That's all I'm asking for. Let's make it more Georgia-centric, so that way the men and women, the 800,000 men and women, military veterans that's calling Georgia home, and their families could be proud of a resolution. And so that's all I was just trying to get clarity of Representative Glanton's amendment. If we're going to be consistent, let's not just group them by a numeric number. Let's spell them out by name if we're going to put George Washington and everybody else.
All right. Thank you. Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we could probably go on all night or whatever, but the reality of the situation is that we have a motion on the floor for the bill, and then we have a motion on the amendment. At this time, if possible, I'd like to call the question and vote on the amendment, and then vote on the motion as such.
All right, so at this time, we are going to vote on the amendment as originally presented, and then, depending on that, the next step. So if you are all those in favor of the amendment as presented by Representative Glanton, say yay. Count three. If you, all those not in favor, say no. No. All right, the noes carry. The amendment did not pass. Now to the vote. Now we are now voting on the resolution as presented by Representative Clark in LC 44135-0S. All those in favor of the resolution say yay. Yay. All those opposed say no. The yeas carry. The resolution is passed. At this time, I'll turn it back over to Chairman Clark.
All right. With no further business on the agenda, the committee's adjourned.